Well, many thanks indeed for joining me here in St Andrews on St Andrews Day, and a very happy St Andrews Day to all of you, to all Scots here at home and around the world. Now, our thoughts today, of course, are very much with those affected by yesterday's horrific terrorist attack in London. We think of all those who sustained injury, and especially of the families of those who lost their lives. There are simply no words that can ease the pain that those families will be feeling today and for a long, long time to come. We also pay tribute to the bravery of ordinary members of the public who risked their own lives to protect others, demonstrating in the process all that is good and decent in humanity. And of course, we thank the emergency services whose professionalism and courage is a source of constant inspiration to all of us. Now, obviously, in the aftermath of an atrocity like this, our minds and our hearts are first and foremost with those whose lives have been shattered. But we should also remember that terrorists want to make us scared, and they want to undermine the democracy that we cherish. So especially now, and even as we grieve, we must resolve to show democracy's strength and resilience. All of us must do that as part of our response. Now, everyone here will be very familiar with the Declaration of Arbroath, one of the most famous statements of self-determination ever written. The Declaration said that the people of Scotland would be under the protection of the most gentle St Andrew as their patron forever. Now, next year will be the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath and of St Andrew officially becoming Scotland's patron saint. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it would be fitting for modern Scotland to declare our wish to rejoin the independent countries of the world during that 700th anniversary. But today, as you might expect, I do have a more immediate date in mind. It is now less than 2 weeks until the general election on December the 12th. Now, all elections are important, of course they are, and all politicians will always tell you that. But this election really, really matters. The future of Scotland is on the line in this election. At stake are the opportunities and the life chances of this and future generations. In this election, people in Scotland are being asked a fundamental question. Who should decide our future? The people who live here or Boris Johnson? The answer to that question will have long-term consequences for the kind of country that we will be. It seems right, therefore, that on this, the day of Scotland's patron saint, we ask ourselves how we can build that better, fairer Scotland that we all know is possible. So today I want to talk about the SNP's vision for Scotland and indeed the practical action that we are taking to improve people's lives, and contrast that with the future that the Conservatives have in store for us. We have right now a Westminster system that leads to Tory governments in Scotland that we don't vote for. Tory governments imposing policies like Brexit that do our country harm. A vote for the SNP in this election is a vote to escape the mess of Brexit, and it is a vote to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. Brexit is, after all, just the latest, albeit a very extreme example, of Westminster Tory governments damaging jobs, living standards and public services. The effect of Brexit on the health service will be particularly severe. You know, the ideals of the National Health Service are a demonstration of the kind of country we aspire to be. Collective care and compassion for one another, a sense of solidarity and contributing to something bigger than ourselves, and a statement that everyone is entitled to health treatment free at the point of use. Now, of course, all health services are facing pressures, and Scotland's is no different. In government, the SNP is investing record amounts. Despite cuts from Westminster, we're spending £136 per head more than elsewhere in the UK on frontline health services. We've also made prescriptions free, and there are more consultants and more nurses now than when we took office. In all of this, we've protected Scotland's NHS from the creeping privatisation we've seen the Tories impose south of the border. But make no mistake, in my view, Brexit is the biggest threat to Scotland's NHS, probably since it was founded all these years ago. It is a real and present danger to our precious, publicly run health service. Brexit will make it harder to attract NHS staff from Europe. The economy with Brexit will slow down, putting increased pressure on NHS budgets. Compared with European membership, Boris Johnson's deal could cut Scotland's national income by £9 billion by the end of the next decade. And if Scotland and the UK is taken out of the EU with no trade deal at all next year, which is looking increasingly likely if the Tories win a majority, the cost could be £12.7 billion. You know, that's the equivalent of around £2,300 for every person in Scotland. And US drugs firms want full market access to the NHS in any Tory-Trump trade deal, raising the prices that the health service has to pay. The Foreign Secretary has even complained in the past that Scotland has too many nurses and ambulance staff compared with the rest of the UK. And all of this adds up to a sustained Tory assault on Scotland's health service. The NHS will never, ever be safe in Tory hands. In Scotland, of course, the SNP is the challenger to the Tories in all 13 seats that they hold. So in Scotland, it is only a vote for the SNP that can lock the Tories out of office and protect our NHS. On December the 12th, those who want a hard Brexit must be stopped before they do lasting harm to Scotland, and that can only happen by voting for the SNP. The SNP will work with other parties to introduce an NHS Protection Act. That would stop any UK government from selling off the National Health Service. It would ensure that any goods or services that are procured by the NHS couldn't be subject to any future investment protection mechanisms or investor-state dispute resolution mechanisms. As a result, the new law would force any future UK government to have these explicit protections and exemptions on the face of any future trade agreements. Any proposed agreements without those protections couldn't be considered for approval, either by the UK government or the Parliament. And there will be, in addition to that, a double lock to protect Scotland's NHS. The NHS Protection Act that we propose will also require the explicit consent of the Scottish Parliament before any new trade deal can be ratified. So, as always, the SNP will do all we can for Scotland. But people in Scotland know from long and bitter experience that Westminster simply cannot be trusted. In this election, we in Scotland can do our bit to defeat the Tories and deny them the majority that they crave. But as so often in the past, after 12th of December, Scotland could once again be facing a Tory government we did not vote for. It will be a Tory government unlike any we have seen before. It won't just be a threat to the NHS, it will put our economy, jobs and living standards at risk. In no sense at all, will Brexit be done. The whole future relationship on trade, security, migration, fishing and a host of other issues has still to be negotiated. The Westminster chaos will continue. But the difference is that the ultra-Brexiteers will feel free to put into practice their right-wing vision. They look, of course, to Donald Trump's America, not to Europe's social model as their inspiration. Outside the EU, they will feel free to tear up workers' rights, environmental and food standards. And let's never forget that a leading Brexit supporter, Lord Lawson, once hailed the result of the EU referendum as, in his words, a historic opportunity to finish the job that Margaret Thatcher had started. That's not what Scotland wants, and in this election we must make sure that doesn't happen. So on our National Patron Saints Day, we owe it to the people of Scotland to set out a different vision for our country. It is of a country where everyone can grow up believing in a sense of possibility. That means a more prosperous and a more equal Scotland. In government, the SNP is working hard to bring about that better Scotland. While other parties promise it in this election, we've already abolished university tuition fees. We've set up a genuinely progressive income tax system which helps low-paid and middle-income earners. We are setting up right now a new national investment bank. We've kept the water industry in public hands. And while the Tories have been cutting police numbers in England, we've increased the number of police officers by more than 1,000. We've massively outstripped the rest of the UK in social and council house building. And we're also helping with the cost of living. The SNP is right now investing, for example, in a huge expansion of early learning and childcare for vulnerable 2-year-olds and all 3- and 4-year-olds. That will be introduced in full next year, saving families up to £4,500 per child per year. With limited powers, we've also established a social security system that has dignity and fairness at its heart. We're introducing a new £10 a week Scottish child payment for low-income households by the end of next year, and it will lift 30,000 children out of poverty when it's fully implemented. In this election, we set out what we will demand on behalf of the people of Scotland if the SNP holds the balance of power. An end to austerity, a £4 billion boost for Scotland's NHS, greatly enhanced maternity and parental leave, more action on climate change, the end of the 2-child cap on tax credits and the associated rate clause. These and a range of other measures are practical benefits to people's lives that the SNP will seek to deliver through a progressive alliance. But they also speak to our values, and they demonstrate the kind of country that we are seeking to build. It is a country where, first and foremost, the decisions about Scotland's future are taken by the people who care most about Scotland, and that's the people who live here, no matter where they come from. And that is the fundamental point of independence. It is the ability to take our own decisions to build a better country. And by that, I do mean decisions taken by everyone who lives here, wherever they come from. Scotland urgently needs the powers to do many things, but one of those things is to implement a migration policy that is tailored to our needs. You know, all of the increase in Scotland's population over the next 25 years is predicted to come from migration. We must keep attracting people to Scotland and keep providing opportunities for people born here in order to grow our economy, provide the staffing for our public services and raise the tax revenue needed for the NHS and our other services. It is essential to maintain our world-class universities, such as this one here in St Andrews. If we're forced out of the EU with the end of freedom of movement, that job will become so much harder. But you know, this isn't just a matter of economics or public services, vital though these are. It is also about who we are as a country. People who have come to Scotland from elsewhere in the UK, from Europe and further afield, have enriched our society in so many different ways. You know, those who have chosen Scotland as their home honour us every day that they are here, and we must do everything we can to ensure the message that Scotland is a welcoming country continues to be heard by all of our fellow EU citizens. In an independent Scotland, control over our migration policy will rest with the Scottish Parliament, not with Westminster. The Scottish Parliament will also control all of Scotland's tax policy, so we can continue the work of building that fairer, more prosperous society. People in Scotland and the Scottish Parliament will control social security policy. That means we can stop spending hundreds of millions of pounds mitigating Tory policies that Scotland never voted for in the first place, and which are forcing children and others into poverty. Scotland will have control over our own resources, which means we can create a net zero fund to help pay for the clean energy transition through investment in areas such as renewable energy, electric vehicles and carbon capture. We'll have control over employment policy so that we can protect workers' rights. We'll make our own decisions on our European future. As a member of the EU, the Single Market and Customs Union, our businesses will be part of the world's biggest trading bloc. And as an independent country, we will always get the governments that we vote for. In an independent Scotland, never again would we be subjected to a Tory Westminster government with no mandate here in Scotland. And of course, Boris Johnson will never be Prime Minister of an independent Scotland. As an independent country, we can build that better Scotland that we know is possible. People in Scotland are right now facing two very different futures. A future in which Westminster is in control of our lives, where a Tory government increasingly in the grip of ultra-Brexiteers seeks to impose an ever more unequal society. Or we can choose a future as an independent country, in which the people of Scotland are in charge. A country that offers a fresh start, free from the Westminster chaos and the dangers of right-wing, anti-European governments we don't vote for. Never have those different futures for Scotland been so stark. So never has it been so important for people in Scotland to have the opportunity to choose between them. And that's why it is so vital for people in this election to protect that right to decide their own future. And the way to protect that right is to vote SNP. So in these final days of this election campaign, Scotland's future really will be on the line. For SNP members and supporters, there has never been a more important time to make your voices heard and to campaign. We need to take our message of hope, for that is what it is. We need to take that message of hope to every community across our land. So talk to your friends and neighbours and explain just what is at stake. Work as if we are in the early days of that better nation. Because this election is Scotland's opportunity. It is Scotland's opportunity to escape Brexit. It is our opportunity to lock the Tories out of government, to stop Boris Johnson. And it is our opportunity to put Scotland's future into Scotland's hands. So for the sake of this and of future generations, let us grasp that opportunity. On December the 12th, vote SNP so that we can then get on with that job of building a fairer, better, independent nation. Thank you all very much indeed. you. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions from the journalists in the room, if there are any, if they can wave their hands in the air and let me know if they...
Hi. Alexandra, BBC. The polls are suggesting that Boris Johnson is likely to win the election, perhaps with a comfortable majority. He's already said no to another independence referendum. So what would you do then to achieve that Scotland that you've just described, that independent Scotland?
Look, I know this is a question that there's intense interest in from the media, no doubt from others in this room, but I'm going to stick to fighting this election campaign, firstly to win it for the SNP and to do everything I can to stop Boris Johnson getting that majority. A Tory majority is not inevitable in this election, and you know, I think the polls actually tell us that very clearly and very strongly. So my message to people across the country is, if you don't want Boris Johnson to be in charge on the 13th of December, if you don't want to wake up to that image, that not very nice image of him walking back through the door of number 10, then make sure we play our part in making sure he's not calling the shots after this election. And I emphasise again what I did in my remarks and what I'm doing every day in this election. Scotland can play our part in that. There are 13 Tory-held seats in Scotland. The SNP is the main challenger in every single one. So the more of these that we win, the less chance there is of Boris Johnson getting that majority he craves. That's the way for Scotland to not just send that message, but to achieve that reality that we are in charge of our own future, that it's not Boris Johnson calling the shots. Anyone else? Is there? Okay. In that case, thank you all very much for coming. Get back out there, get on the campaign trail. We've got, as you have just seen, the most fantastic candidate in this constituency in Stephen Gethin. So to those of you who are campaigning for Stephen, thank you very much. Get out and do more of it over these next few days.